Today, let us go through the lesson Mystery of the Missing Cape by Manoj Das. Manoj Das, who is a prolific writer, writes both in Odia and in English. He rendered his service as a professor of English at the Sri Aurobindo International University, Puducherry. He has an unusually keen insight. Insight means acute observation into human nature. He blends. Blends means what? Blends means mixes or unites. And what does he blend in his writing? He blends realism with fantasy. Fantasy means imagination. What do we find in his writing? We find that he mixes realism with imagination. Satire. Satire means ridicule with deep compassion. Deep compassion with deep kindness. Humor. Humor means full of fun and pathos. Pathos means intense sorrow in his short fiction. In this story, we have been introduced to two leading characters. They are a minister and a village patriot of the post-independent India. Here we have some noteworthy incidents like the convention of arranging a meeting for a VIP in the village, the reception of the minister in the village, an extraordinary incident before the very eyes of the narrator and others. Now let us go through the text. It is certainly not my motive in recounting this episode of 2 decades ago to raise a laugh at the expense of Sri Maharana or Babu Birkishore than the Honorable Minister of Fisheries and Fine Arts of my state. It is certainly not the intention of the narrator Manoj Das in describing or in narrating this episode. This episode means this event. This event means the event of missing cape, which took place some 2 decades ago. A decade refers to a period of 10 years, and 2 decades means 20 years before. To raise a laugh. To raise a laugh is to make fun of. At the expense of means at the cost of Sri Maharana or Babu Birkishore, the then Honorable Minister of Fisheries and Fine Arts of my state. Was Babu Birkishore? Babu Birkishore was the then Honorable Minister of Fisheries and Fine Arts of our own state. On the contrary, the narrator wishes that his friends and readers should share their sympathy, which he had secretly nurtured or developed in his heart for these two men over all these years. Sri Maharana was a well-to-do man. Well-to-do means wealthy or rich man. Sri Maharana, who was a village patriot, was a wealthy man. He had the only Pakka house in an area of 20 villages. If there was a Pakka house in an area of 20 villages, it belonged to Sri Maharana. White was on the eve of India achieving independence. And what did Sri Maharana do immediately India achieved her independence? Sri Maharana whitewashed his building or his house on the eve or on the occasion of India achieving independence. As a result, the house shone in the past tense of shine, shone. As a result, the house shone as a sort of tourist attraction for the folks. For the folks means for the people of the nearby villages. They stopped and looked at it whenever they passed by. Whenever the villagers of nearby villages visited the village of Sri Maharana, they stopped and looked at the house of Sri Maharana, for none could overlook the symbolism. The symbolism means the whitewashed house that stood as a symbol of a new independent India. In this operation that had been carried out after nearly half a century, the house was neglected for nearly half a century. It means it was not whitewashed for nearly half a century. But Mr. Asri Maharana whitewashed his building immediately India achieved her independence. It means he wanted to show to others how happy he was India after achieving her independence. Sri Maharana had a considerable reputation. Considerable means huge. Reputation Reputation means good name and fame. Considerable means huge or large. As a conscientious means guided by one's duty. And generous means giving freely. Man. So what kind of person was Sri Maharana? Sri Maharana was a conscientious and a generous person. And he had a huge reputation in the area. Sri Maharana had a considerable reputation as a conscientious and generous man. He was an exemplary host. Exemplary means a model. Host means one who entertains guests. He was an exemplary host with 2 ponds full of choice fish. He had his own fishery. As he had 2 ponds of his own, he had fish of his own choice and a number of well cared for cows. He was indeed a happy villager. Came independence. Came independence. India became independent. As is well known, the ancient land of India has had four major castes from time immemorial, since long past. Our land, which is known as the ancient land of the world, has had four major castes. But during the days immediately preceding independence, preceding means after or before. Here, preceding means after independence, a new caste was emerging, came into being or came into existence all over the country of patriots. The 15th of August 1947 gave a big boost. Here boost means increase to their growth. Here their growth means the growth of the patriots. And what was seen immediately after independence? Immediately after independence, a couple of patriots could be seen in almost every village of our state. In almost every village, beside the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, a couple of patriots came into being. It was observed that the small fisheries of Simhana were often exercised in honor of these new people. These new people refers to the patriots that came into being immediately after India became an independent country. It was seen or it was observed that the small fisheries, as he had 2 ponds of his own, he had his own fisheries full of choice fish, and he used the fish of the ponds of his own for these people. For these people means for these patriots. It was observed that the small fisheries of Simhana were often exercised or used in respect or in honor of these new people. And observers began to notice or see that Simhana himself was fast becoming a patriot. And what was seen by people? People saw that Sri Maharana became also a patriot. As I found out later, found out means discovered. Here I refers to the narrator Monotas. And what did he find out later? The narrator found out later that he had even lost the ambition to become a member of the state legislature. See, why did he become a patriot? He did not have any contribution for the freedom struggle of our country. He became a patriot after India became independent because he had lost the ambition to become an MLA or a member of a state legislature assembly. The incident I now relate occurred at the outset. At the outset means in the beginning of his endeavor. Endeavor means struggle in that direction. The incident that the narrator relates is now relating occurred at the outset or in the beginning of his struggle in that direction. In that direction means in the direction of becoming a member of the state legislature. The narrator also witnessed the incident as a small boy in his maternal uncle's house, which he frequently visited, being just near Sri Mahanas. The narrator witnessed the incident of the missing cave as a small boy, and as a child he used to visit his maternal uncle's house frequently, and Sri Mahana's house was very near to the house of his maternal uncle's house. The narrator witnessed the incident as a small boy in his maternal uncle's house, which he frequently visited, being just near Sri Mahana's house. When the narrator narrates the event, he does so naturally with the understanding which has matured in him with the passage of time. In those days, that means immediately after India became an independent country, what was found? Swadeshi ministers were found. There were no deputy or sub-deputy ministers, and all were full-fledged honorable ministers. And Babu Birkishore, who held the portfolios or the post of fisheries and fine arts, hailed means here represented from our district. Our district refers to the district of the narrator. Babu Birkishore, the then Honorable Minister of Fisheries and Fine Arts, represented the district of the narrator. The sponsors of Simhana thought that it would be proper that the debut of Simhana into politics should have the blessings of Babu Birkishore. In those days, a minister's daily life was largely made up of speech making at public receptions. Receptions means act of receiving. In those days, in the past, that means after India became an independent country, a minister's daily life was largely made up of speech making at public receptions. The ministers spent their time mostly in making speeches at public receptions. So, a reception was arranged for Babu Birkishore with Sri Maharana as the chairman of reception committee. So, the sponsors made Sri Maharana as the chairman of the reception committee, and a reception was arranged for the visit of Babu Birkishore to the village of Sri Maharana. Then they all engaged for the reception. First of all, they brought the huge ancestral cane chair from the house of Sri Maharana. Thereafter, they put a linen cover upon it. And the village seamstress, the tailor, woman tailor is known as the village seamstress, had laced a pair of herons with two big fish in their beaks. And remember, the plural form of fish is also fish. What did the sponsors of Simbhana do? The sponsors of Simbhana brought the huge ancestral cane chair from the house of Simbhana. Thereafter, a linen cloth was put upon it, and the best village seamstress had laced a pair of herons with two big fish in their beaks. For a fortnight means a period of 2 weeks. For a fortnight every day, the children of the village lower primary school devoted means spent the afternoon to the practice of the welcome song. Among the many strange phenomena or the event wrought by or done by the great spirit of the time was the composition of this song. Here, this song means the welcome song. And who composed this welcome song? It was composed by the village head pandit, who had lived 67 years of his life without any poetic activity. When he was approached by the sponsors of Simbhana, he did not deny, he rather accepted the proposal and composed the welcome song. And the lower primary school children of the village spent their time in the afternoon to present this welcome song. The refrain of the song still raises echoes in me. Here the refrain, the line that is repeated again and again in every stanza is called the refrain. The refrain of the song still raises echoes in the ears of the narrator. Its literal translation would be, "O mighty minister, do tell us, how do you nurse this long and broad universe?" These were the initial lines of the welcome song. This way, the village head pandit composed the welcome song. The rest of the song catalogued the great changes the nature and humanity experienced on the occasion of the minister's coming, and how the sun almost blazed in romantic happiness that morning, and how each and every bird recited a particular rag. Rag is an Odia word, it is not an English word, and with what eagerness and throbbing of heart the women folk waited to blow their conch shells when the minister stepped into the village. See how the arrangement was done for the visit of the then Minister of Fisheries and Fine Arts, Babu Birkishore. The rest of the welcome song catalogued the great changes that the nature and humanity had experienced on the occasion of the minister's visit to the village of Simbhana, and how the sun almost felt shy in romantic happiness that morning, and how each and every bird recited a particular rag, and with what eagerness and throbbing of heart the women folk waited to blow their conch shells immediately after the minister stepped into the village. I know that nowadays ministers do not enjoy such glory. We know ministers do not enjoy such glory, but in the past, ministers enjoyed such glories. But it was very different then. We, the rustic means village children wrangled means argued over several questions. What does the minister eat? What does he think? Does he sleep or not? Does he ever suffer from colic or colds? These were the questions that came to the minds of the rustic children or the village children about the ministers. Sri Mahana himself was very excited, was hectically excited. He used to sleep for a full hour in the afternoon. It was the habit of Sri Mahana to sleep for a full hour after his lunch in the afternoon. But he gave up. He gave up this habit of his at least 10 days prior to. Prior to means before the reception. And how did he spend his time? All his time was spent in examining and re-examining details of the arrangements. Though all the arrangements were done perfectly, yet he appeared, he seemed, Simahana seemed nervously uncertain, thinking some of the arrangements were not properly done. Thank you.